Good afternoon and welcome. Good to see everyone back after half term. Just for those people who've not participated before, this is an interactive thing. You're very welcome to ask a question at any stage, comment on anything, and we very much encourage you to do that. If you'd like to turn your chat on down the right-hand side, if you've got a question or you've got a comment or you'd like to confirm something or ask people for information, please do put it in the chat column. And as always, although there'll be a recording of the video of it, the chat won't be in that. So if there's anything with any sensitivity of any sort, feel free to put it in the chat, and it will evaporate at the end of the recording. I thought it might be helpful. We're very pleased to invite a guest, Paul Mitchell, who is the athletic director at Copenhagen International School and a member of the Nordic Network Steering Committee, which sounds intimidating. And the significance is that that Paul's school and the schools in that area have been through, they're a number of weeks ahead. They've been through lockdown. The primary schools came back, the secondary schools are coming back now. And Paul has kindly offered, it's an act of faith, I hope he's there, to talk us through what they've been through and to take anyone's questions on the logistics of it, etc. Paul, I see
Hi.
you.
Hi, Neil. Pleased to meet you.
And you. And I know that everyone else is keen to benefit from your experience, Paul. I wonder if you'd maybe just start off by giving us a bit of an account of what happened, and particularly the stages in which you've come back and its implication for sport. But I know that sport is different in Denmark and is run as an after thing slightly outside schools. So if you could let us know about what you've done within schools in physical education and what's happened outside schools in sport, that would be helpful. And if you've got any questions for Paul, please do put them in the chat. Paul, all yours.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Pleased to meet you all, and thank you for welcoming me to take part in this. And I hope that I can offer a few things which can maybe help you out. So it was back in the middle of March when we were monitoring the situation. We'd had a couple of cases in the country, but nothing at the school. We had started to plan for going off into remote learning, and then suddenly in the evening after we had a whole school meeting about it, we suddenly heard we were going to be locked down. So that was it. 2 days notice, and we were into remote learning. That in itself, as you all know, creates challenges for us in terms of PE, particularly for the younger students. It was very, very hard for them to be participating, and need a lot of parental support for that, to deal with the technology side of things and that. So with that in mind, and that was not just for PE, it was also for the other subject areas as well. With that, we started to get over that peak. They announced that after Easter, we would be returning with the primary school students. So, again, with very short notice, the leadership and the work environment and unions started to plan, which had quite an impact upon the physical education aspects as well. So, leading into the lockdown, with all the clubs and after-school sports, and as a school, as an international school, we run our own club with a variety of international school teams in different sports and compete in different competitions. One of which is NISIS, which is across Northwestern Europe, and the tournaments for that got closed down really quickly. As we then started to look to come out of remote learning, and we had to put these new guidelines in place, we had to, at that time, still maintain a 2 meter distance from anybody. There was strict process of coming into the school building. So our normal one entrance in, we had to make multiple entrances, which in effect meant that drop off students in the morning and to come into school. Physical education had to be taught outside, which when the second week it started to rain, that became a bit of an intriguing problem. And also the students had to be outside for the majority of the day. Remember, this is just the primary school. So that required a lot of organisation because they had to do it staggered. And it meant also that you had to have a lot of adults which were supervising that. The class groups had to be small. So basically there was 10 students and 1 teacher. Typically, where possible, that was like 2 groups of 5, where it worked out, that would be 5 boys and 5 girls. And they were there like their social group. So they then had to go to recess together, and they also did their PE together. So we had to plan for having small groups and using the same 5 as being in a team together. With being an international school in an inner city, we don't have a lot of outdoor space, and in fact we're right up next to it. We're on a quay, so we have a big drop of water on 3 sides of the building. So we were very limited in outdoor space, although we had on top of the roof above the sports halls a play area which they could use, and one in front of the school building. So our PE staff had to be quite creative, coming up with activities which were mainly like skill type activities which could be done to just be working like target shooting, that sort of stuff. But there was also very strict rules in terms of the cleaning. So before a student came to an activity, they had to be clean their hands, and then and afterwards they had to clean their hands, and any resources which were used had to be cleaned. So we had to try and minimise the amount of equipment usage for that. They had been back about 3 weeks, getting on towards a month, when we heard that we were then going to return our grades 6 to 10 students. Now the primary students have been excellent. It was actually very good for them to be self-discipline themselves, to hold distance and that, and had got themselves into a very good routine. So it was decided to try and keep that sort of routine and keep those small groups for them, but they had to then give a little bit more space back to the rest of the school. We decided with the 6 to 10s on their return, we wanted to try and get as close to possible to the same sort of schedule that they had been running. We tried to maintain that going into remote learning. After a few weeks of that, we had to just drop 1 lesson to give them a bit of a break during the day on remote learning. But in returning back, we decided to go back to virtually the full schedule, just an increased amount of cleaning time, and also building in snack and lunch times in the classroom setting. It also was, because we also had DP students who were still on remote learning, we had to maintain some spaces for teachers to do remote learning from school as well. As a department, we sort of thought, okay, and at the same time, the government decided that we could reduce the distancing down to 1 metre apart, and they were allowing more students to then be in a classroom together, which made the logistics quite interesting. As a typical international school, students also have different groups, class groups for different subject areas. So they're continually rotating and intermixing. we had to discuss how to do that, whether we're going to do a similar program to the primary, or we're going to maintain the same scheduling program and just make sure that we maintain the hygiene sort of regime to match that, which is what we decided to do. We also wanted to try and minimise the times that the students would be in transition, so they would have come in a bit later after the primary school students. Again, looking at different entrances for middle school and high school. Looking at being on different floor areas. We were restricted in terms of which classrooms as to the capacity they could have, whilst maintaining distance apart. And even though they had reduced the distance to 1 metre, which was in line with WHO's regulations and recommendations, and also in line with Norway, who have only been 1 metre apart throughout the whole of the crisis. For certain activities, like when a teacher is standing in front of a group and projecting their voice, that has to be done at 2 metres. When students are moving themselves and being active, that has to be done at 2 metres. So that's obviously made some restrictions we had there as well. So we sat down and thought, outdoor facilities, pretty non-existent for us in terms of middle and high school students. We do have, very fortunate to have 3 large sports halls, and that's what we'd be normally using in the school day anyhow for their lessons. So we then tried to work out, okay, what activities can we do where they are able to maintain distance apart. If they're side by side, it had to be 1 metre. When they're facing each other and being physically active, 2 metres. If they're moving around, it has to be 2 metres. And so we started to work on doing table tennis and badminton as units. From there, we then started to bring in other activities, like went to 3-on-3 volleyball. Then we also went into some small drill activities with footballs and basketball balls. As you mentioned before, the Danish school system, they don't really have after-school activity programs from the school. It's very much a club-based focus, although we as an international school provide it for our students. So we have our own school club. And the regulations there, which are currently existing at the moment, and they've been allowed to start practices again outside, not allowed inside yet. Not allowed to do any form of scrimmaging, no sort of one-on-ones, 2-on-2s, anything like that's not allowed. So it's very much a drills focus and quite a high sort of fitness and strengthening type of activities for them to do there. With all this, as we were planning into it, our focuses were to make sure that everybody felt comfortable and secure in terms of the processes we were going to go through, as we need to make sure we communicated out the teachers were in agreement, and that we communicated out to the students and parents as to what was happening. It's impossible to use the change rooms because they're enclosed spaces, and with the regulations, the limitations would be in our change rooms would be to have only 8 in there at a time, and that's just not feasible with the typical PE class sizes. So we had to talk about low activity sessions as well. This has gone quite well with the middle schoolers. They just want to get out and get active and have a break from their classroom restrictions, and so we've done sort of very much same group staying together, working on particular sports where possible of their choices. We gave them guidelines that they had to work on for that, where they understood that there couldn't be any form of contact, and they were working on developing skills for their chosen sport, and that actually went very well. The students were very responsible with that. As we looked up into high school, they were struggling a little bit with the idea of not changing, and really did not like the idea of being active in their normal clothing, even though we suggested they came in sports clothing for the school day. So we have switched back to a health focus, and brought in topics as extensions from the remote learning there. We also realised very early on their return that they struggled with the social distancing or physical distancing. Teenagers find it very, very hard to resist the physical contact now, and that then put us in a difficult position in terms of being more policemen than teachers. So we decided it was much more beneficial, particularly as we're now approaching the end of the school year, to be working on health-based activities. So we've been doing, a colleague of mine has been doing a load of sex education work with them. I've been looking at some nutrition, and also we're looking at we did some breathing techniques work, which I then went into doing some Tai Chi. And those sort of activities, Tai Chi, Zumba, aerobics, you can actually manage quite easily. See, there's some questions.
Yep. Do you want to take Sean's question? How did the youngest children manage with social distancing?
It was something. I mean, this was something that everyone was worried about. They really were. I think the parents were worried about it. The teachers were worried about it, and they were amazing. We have an absolutely fantastic maintenance crew. So they came in on the Monday of Easter and started the setting up process. And then 2 days later, they had everything all marked out, tapes, places, showing the distances, cones marking out the distances for them coming into school. The guidelines were sent out to the parents to talk to the students beforehand about it. Parents understood that they had to literally just let their child go into the system. Got a lot of adults out to not just the teachers, but also maintenance and support teachers and administrative staff. And so there was just a lot of adults out there helping them to start with. They really very quickly got into the routine and holding the distance apart. Distancing within PE is hard to maintain 2 meters, and you just have to be very use clear markings, and then so they know where they are.
Did it make a big difference? Did it make a big difference when you went from 2 meters to 1 meter?
Yeah, but the 1 meter is only in a normal talking scenario.
Right. Okay. So you still 2 meters outdoors.
1 meter outdoors in a normal talking scenario. 1 meter in a classroom setting. But as soon as you bring in that activity or anything where you're singing or projecting a voice in any kind of way, then it has to go to 2 meters. And it's also 2 meters in a enclosed space.
And in terms of the implements you use, balls and equipment and whatever, how often do you clean them?
To start with, it was constantly. It was, the idea we originally had was that for a class group as they came in and set bags down around the sports hall, went to a particular place, we briefed them, we then nominated groups to go to particular tables. There was a table tennis bat or badminton racket or whatever. There was the table tennis ball. There was the shuttlecock. And when they were going to be finished at the end of the lesson, doing the different tasks they had to do, then we were going to clean it down. Up in the higher school level, it was hard for them to maintain the focus on that. So then we needed to clean equipment in between changing them from table tennis to badminton or changing from this table to that table.
Can we
lots.
just take a couple of the questions, Paul, there, please? Charlie's just asking whether you change the timetable to have PE at the end of the day, given that there's no showering and changing, or did people just go, do you maintain the normal timetable and people went back to their classes in whatever state they were in?
Yes, basically. Because there's no use of change rooms, so there's no showering. And once they, if they had first lesson of the day, then they then had, we have a four block day, and we do like a rolling rotation. One of the good things about that is that PE is recognised as any other subject area, so we get the same amount of time as maths or science or English or anything else. But then it does mean that, you know, one day they might have it the first lesson of the day, next day last lesson of the day, etc.
No timetable change because of where you are.
No
Sean's question:
activities.
Who cleaned the balls? Is that do you have a cleaning force, or is that part of the job of the teachers involved?
Yeah, at the start, it was very much the teachers taking responsibility, and then as we developed the systems, we then managed to start to get students to be more involved in that themselves.
And was it any PPE, personal protective equipment, worn by teachers or pupils? Face masks, gloves?
No. In Denmark, the government and the health authorities, they actually discourage the use of masks and gloves, because the biggest problem they find is with the contact surfaces, and they find that with masks or gloves use, that it's very easy to then, if you touch something and it goes onto the mask or onto the gloves, and you then go to take it off or whatever, and touch your face, you've then transferred it to yourself.
A final question from me. I wonder whether then, Paul, you'd be happy to just put some answers in the chat to people's questions there. But how far away do you think you are from sport, opposed, the full versions of sport?
It's a very good question. We're now, we've got 2.5 weeks left before we go to summer vacation. So there's not much longer. We're waiting to hear for the latest regulation changes, which will come out probably the beginning of next week, where we're hoping things like fitness rooms and places like that, the indoor, typical indoor training sort of sessions will be opened up. But again, there'll be very strict regulations.
But you don't see football, basketball?
Football and that is only happening at professional level.
And you don't see that coming back into schools quickly? Clubs
are back training, but in a non-contact, non-competitive situations. It's going to be August, September.
That's really, Paul, thanks very much for that. I wonder if you'd be happy to just put some answers in the chat to the people who've got particular questions. But
yeah,
thanks very much for that.
We can do. Okay.
Appreciate that. If you've got other questions for Paul along the way, please do put them in the chat. Thank you, Paul. And that actually links quite nicely with our next guest, from what Paul's told us about having a health focus in PE, a changing health focus in PE. And we'll maybe just look at our first poll today, and see whether people are considering changing the philosophy around PE lessons, and whether the situation gives an opportunity to deliver PE with a greater well-being focus. If you'd like to vote now with that, just have a minute of that. And whilst you're doing that, we'll come next to Stephen Jones, who's going to just tell us a bit about what he's been doing. Stephen's the Director of Sports Performance and Wellbeing at Wellington School in Somerset, where he's got a fairly innovative programme of physical well-being, which I thought you might be interested in doing, as it does look like last few 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As it does look like, you'd be interested in this, Paul, that people are looking to take the opportunity to change philosophy around PE and to give it a well-being focus. And on that, did you get the results there? So we got the results. Okay, Stefan, I wonder if you would mind just telling us a little bit about what you've been doing with that program, and particularly the well-being side of it.
Yeah, hello everyone. So 5 years ago, we had a restructure. So I was, coming from my background, I was determined that we would separate sport from physical education. Physical education is not sport in my eyes. So every sporting activity was taken away from the PE lessons. So now if you go into, and it was called well-being lessons. So if you go into a well-being lesson with us, there's no sport. So whether you had your A-team netballer, rugby player, or cricketer, or whatever, or national champion, they wouldn't be doing any sport. So it's 7 modules, and I'm changing it again next year. I'm a shocker for changing things. So it's 7 modules. 4 of them are physical based, and there's 3 of them that are emotional well-being, I call it, so theoretically based, and they're in a classroom. So the 4 modules are, and it's essency, it's Rodri Lloyd, John Oliver book, Strength for the Young Athlete, I think it's called, I'm not sure, but it's basically a practical application of their book. So it was, we've got energy system development. And then, so that's the physical well-being. Then the emotional well-being is nutrition, mental health and resilience, and leadership. So every child, and it's on a carousel. And what we try and do, we alternate a theory-based and a practical-based 4-week. And it was group based on personality types in their brain, and we will group accordingly. And then the session details will be planned based on how they react to. But it's worked really well. Can do the squat, the hip hinge, and all that. Our results in terms of every child is benchmarked as well. So we test them 4 times a year. We do FMS, and the athlete take care of itself. I'm a firm believer, you know, we try and teach our children to catch a ball, or to run, to sprint, or to make a tackle, but in fact they just have not got the physical literacy to do that. So by addressing that, fundamentally the first decision I made as the new director of sport, and now we have healthy children. We're never going to be world champions at sport, but we have healthy children who leave Wellington School with a good base of athletic competency, physical literacy, and an understanding of what it means to lead a healthier life. And that's what our jobs are of physical education, to send off talent is DNA, you know. So if you get a parent who's not happy with what we provide, well, it's actually their fault. 50% is theirs. So my role as director of sport is to try and get the rest of the 50%. And we do develop all-rounded, good, athletic, healthy kids. And, you know, in their nutrition lesson, they cook. And I find that awesome. I really do. That floats my boat when children are learning how to cook granola bars, and then in their leadership skills, we're playing blind football, we're doing orienteering, so we're linking it in with outdoor education. They're going to Waitrose and looking at packets of carbohydrates, fat, and all that. So we're introducing GCSE this year for the first time. And you know what? Most of the module I think we've covered from years 7. So I think it's the future. I really do. We need to separate PE from sport. What it's also done is that it's meant the current situation we're in globally, it's not been that much of a change for us. Remote strength session, remote speed sessions, we do it live. And then we got lesson plans for cooking, leadership skills, and mental health resilience, the resilience donut. And the last thing as well, my old head of girls is now head of well-being and PSHE. So she was my head of girls, now she's PSHE. She's head of that. So 2 or 3 of the modules for that is covered in our well-being syllabus.
Thanks, Stefan. Thanks very much for that. Just a couple of questions there. We've got Dave's question. What years do you teach the well-being program?
From year 7 to year 11, but actually that's changing. So we're now restructuring again. So I'm now director of sport of our prep school and our head. So it's going to go all the way down to nursery.
Right. And Tom's just asking what the name of the book and the unit was.
I'll put that down. I need to Google it actually.
Put it in the. I think Andy's come up with an answer there. Any other questions?
The one. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions for Stefan before we move on? Stefan, thanks very much for that. I think it's very timely and obviously an opportunity for people to focus their attention. And the poll showed us that people were intending to do that. If you've got other questions for Stefan, if you want to put them in the chat, or please do that. And then we've got one more guest. Thanks, Stefan. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
One more guest. We talked last time about autumn cricket, but John Bobby talked to us about his plan for a high performance programme that only involved a few people. Ian McGowan, who's Director of Cricket at Merchant Taylors School, has very kindly got in touch to say they've got a programme that's ongoing, and he's offered to tell us a bit about it, and particularly how it interfaces with winter sports. This isn't something that's new for the pandemic. It's something they've had going for a while. I thought we'd be interested in seeing how that interfaces with winter sports and how it's gone before. Another act of faith. Ian, are you there? So it's, you might need to unmute.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thanks, Neil. Yeah, thanks for having us this afternoon, and cheers, Steph, for great insights always. I'll spend a couple of minutes outlining what we do at Merchant Taylors School. We're a school based in Northwest London, for those of you that don't know. September cricket for us is kind of a 5-week programme, starting in the last week of August, late summer. The ground is usually rock hard, and it's arguably better weather than April, particularly if you're a batter. With our squad, about 6 we kind of train on the squares that we play on, and having superb ground staff here at the school that want their pitches played on certainly helps. We're fortunate we have plenty of pitches that aren't encroached by other sports as well. And the past 7 years, we've county age group sides, under 17, under 18 groups, academies, and then September. Games local mainly because it encroaches on other sports being played in that term. So for me, the most important still, those boys not on the rugby side train midweek with me, and I can select them for the games. We have had to be really flexible with our better rugby playing cricketers, but it's given us opportunities there to blood some young talent and broaden our pool of players capable of playing first team cricket. Our director of rugby and head of strength and conditioning at the school have been great in recent years, managing load and really educating the boys around preparing well for that quite a congested period of rugby and cricket for those that do cross over. The games themselves are developmental, as there's no risk taking over a player, although we still want to be competitive. And after September cricket finishes, the boys take time off from their sports-specific training, often until the end of November, working predominantly in the gym on injuries and recovery and that sort of thing. I thought Neil's asked me to talk about how it all came about. The idea, as it were, came from my predecessor at the school, Tom Webley, who's now at Wells Cathedral School as Director of Sport there. So he has to take the credits. It came together because it was an opportunity to get the group post-summer break before the long stretch that is the winter training program. We have relatively poor indoor facilities comparatively to our outdoor facilities, where we have 12 grass squares on the grounds, and we only have 2 little indoor nets that overlook our sports hall. This gives the school an opportunity for more quality practice in realistic conditions, and it's been a fantastic chance to reflect with the lads after their summer break, where they might have been playing for their club or their county, and with their parents on the sidelines for that matter. It's given us an opportunity to reassess their development plans and target specific goals for what senior cricket might look like, which we know is completely different to age group cricket. It's been one of the most important aspects of the September Pro that time, and some of them come back 6 inches taller. And that can completely reframe not only my opinion of them as a player, but also their season, and they communicate with us throughout the season. And there's September cricket's given us an opportunity to expose boys to now school. They've lost 10. I wanted a generation side where they had 10 year 13 cricketers. I'm glad we didn't play them this year. But we often carry 1 or 2 youngsters in the team as well. Nice opportunity for them to be around warm-ups and get into the field. And it's the last thing, it's just a great chance to kind of build bridges with the sides that we're playing against. As I say, we play against the county academies, and that's been a really nice opportunity to form strong relationships with them and communicate.
Can I ask you how many? I was going to say boys. Is it all boys? And how many pupils are involved in the program in the autumn?
Yeah, it's an all boys school. So we have 950 students at the school, of which I'm lucky to get 14 or 16 on that program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the dual sport athletes, the people who play rugby as well as cricket, they play rugby at that time.
Yes. We often, it's a very fine balance. If the ground's really hard, the director of rugby is kind enough to let us have those cricketers, and then vice versa. Yes.
Ian, that's great. If you've got questions for Ian, please do put them in the chat. But I think it's fascinating that model is already ongoing, very similar to what John described to us the other week. Would you have any advice for anyone starting that up? Are there any mistakes you made that can people benefit from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. We often capped young players at that time, and they've swarmed about the winter, thinking they've made it. Something that we definitely misjudged. That's one thing, and then not trying to see it as developmental. It's a real opportunity to kind of blood some young players, and we've seen it more recently as a chance to broaden the pool of players that we have, rather than see it as another competitive fixture. So those are 2 things that we've certainly made mistakes on over the 7 years we've been running it.
And Matt's just saying, do you have your cricketers back before the term? Do you have some sort of pre-season activity, or do you just go straight into it at the start of the term?
A lot of our cricketers do play county and club cricket, but there are some that don't. So we usually get them back in for a couple of days training before they go into the September cricket fixtures. Yeah.
And how many fixtures would you play in the autumn?
So we play normally every Sunday. As I say, we're hoping to try and develop that further this year, all being well.
So that's 4-ish.
Yeah, we played four games last year, a mixture of a 20-20, 2 20-20s in a day, or a 50 over game. Yeah.
Ian, thanks very much. I know people will be interested in that. And if
Thanks,
you've got
Neil.
other questions for Ian, please do put them in the chat. Thanks very much for that, Ian. And moving on, I know that there are an ever-growing number of regional groups that are getting together to talk about the logistics of what they're doing and how they're going to collaborate together. And I wonder if we just have a few updates of those now. And you recall last time we met, Steve Adams had just started a group in East Anglia, and I wondered, Steve, if you could just give us an update on how that's going and what type of topics you've been talking about.
Yeah, hi Neil and everyone there. We met, there was 21 of us met for the East Anglia group, so covering the counties of Essex, Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire, Norfolk, Suffolk. And just very briefly, 6 topics which I no doubt will be, the same across the country, really. One was seasonal adjustments, including the cricket, tennis, athletics. And some schools were up for this as a possibility, just depending on grounds and pitches. And also, obviously, we just got to wait upon guidance and whether we've got fixtures, if we can play any fixtures in September. But certainly a possibility for 2021. So that was encouraging. Inter-school fixtures was the second topic in the midterm. Nearly everyone conceded there won't be any fixtures, possibly next term, and at best, maybe inter-house competitions will be the route. But again, we'll see what is attainable. The third, we looked at Lent-term plan for fixtures for rugby, boys hockey. Hockey is more of the Lent-term sport in the east than your friend association football. Girls hockey and netball, and whether we may even look at just having a different program of half a term of each on the major game. And again, schools agreed if we can get some fixtures in, we'll all work together to try and create a half-term block of some fixtures for some of those pupils. Fourth one was timetable implications and timing of games. Social distancing, risk assessment, management, that was probably the biggest concern amongst us all. The social distancing, so that was interesting, learning what's happening with Paul in Denmark there. Schools looking at splitting of games, lessons, if at all possible. And we all agree that we'll be facing a very different pace in September. Fifth was facilities and staffing implications. One was depending on time of PE games, each school different. Indoor facilities, major issue, particularly from October to February. So that will curtail some aspects of planning. And obviously the issue of furloughed staff, part-time coaches, which is obviously a concern of who will be back and whether schools can afford to bring them back. And the final one was, do schools run cycling? And just looking to see if any schools in the area did, and a few did, and just said some of the issues with it, some of the problems. But certainly Andy at Haileybury has kindly shared a risk assessment for those that did at Haileybury. So I'll be able to pass that around just to see whether that's something we can go with from September. And then we're planning to meet next Thursday for the second meet. So, but the best point was everyone was in agreement to work together and collaborate, and I think that's only good for all of us as directors of sport.
And new members welcome at your new meeting, Steve?
Yes, always welcome. So I'll put the address down. So anyone from East Region or bordering, we had Nick from Oundle join us as well. So because we do venture over into East Northamptons and links. So
brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Steve. And almost as if it was a plan, we're just going to the second poll now, which is about what Steve was talking about seasonal change. And I thought it might be interesting to see what people were planning to do. So if you'd like to, let's have a look at, I think there's a few simple questions, and just let us know what you're thinking, and then we can share those in terms of termly adjustments, and then we'll take Richie's offer up to update us on the Monmouth group after that. Okay. Last couple of seconds. Okay. If you want to have a look at the results there, I think there's still quite a lot of indecision, and clearly some decisions are going to need to be made shortly. I just wanted to pick up on this this last issue. Sorry, looking through there, it looks like there is considerable enthusiasm or forming plans for summer sports in the first half of term. And then just look at question 4, which I think is quite a significant one. Clearly rugby will be one of the last things to come back, and the later it's in the school year, the more chance it's got of happening. And there seems to be a growing number of people looking at that. I wonder, sorry, Steve, whether we could just go back to you and what the feeling was in your meeting about doing that sort of adjustment.
Yeah, a number of the schools, obviously because of our locality, you know, we're always struggling perhaps a little bit with fixtures. It's not as easy perhaps as based in the Midlands or London. If there are some fixtures that we can get done, we'll have to work together, working with our heads, directors of rugby, hockey, netball, and between us as directors of sport, look to come up with a solution for what will fit and to give some of these pupils an opportunity to play. So,
and the seasonal shift is part of that.
Yeah, and I think so, and I certainly think, or looking particularly at the, you know, cricket certainly coming to September, but again it depends on school size. Perhaps some of the large schools may be able to do it. Those smaller schools or mixed co-ed, I mean, for us, you know, it's quite difficult. A lot of the same pupils will play the same sports, but I think we've got to be open-minded and see where we go.
Cheers, Steve. Thanks very much for that, and congratulations on your group. Richie, are you Richie Miller, who's I think chairman of the Monmouth group? Rich from Boston, is he?
Oh, thanks for the promotion, Neil. That's really kind of you. I'm not chair, but I think it was our turn.
You're the oldest member of it, then, are you?
Well, settle down. Takes one to know one. I think it was our turn to host, so I just reached out to try and get everyone together. And yeah, we've been meeting a bit. So we had a meeting this week, which was really just a catch up because we didn't feel a huge amount had changed that we hadn't already sort of discussed. So we're just sort of waiting, like everyone else is, to find out what the next update is. But as with all of those catch-ups, we ended up getting on to a few more things. So this week we talked a little bit about virtual events. So I was interested in particular in people who'd done a virtual sports award evening or presentation thing as a way to sort of get the community together. And just asking for ideas really on that, whether people were doing it with live streams. And I think we all were suggesting that we were finding that as difficult. And so lots of people were finding sort of solutions with posting videos and that sort of route. And we had some quite good chats about virtual sports days. So again, ways to engage kids and parents in something towards the end of term to get us involved in some sport again. Other things, we were able to have just a quick chat with QEH, who've got some year 6s back at school, and we wanted to find out a little bit about how that was going for them. And it was interesting listening to Paul talking about the sort of social distancing problems that he's mentioned and experiencing in Denmark. That was definitely a problem at QEH. Kids really were struggling with that, and therefore staff spent most of their time as Paul said, as policemen, and in the end got bored of that, and the social distancing sort of went out the window a little bit, I think. So we're just sort of waiting to see how parents respond to that, I think, whether they choose then not to send their kids back the next day or whether they stick with it. They had a really high percentage of kids back as well. I think he was sort of talking about 80% of their kids were back in, so that was pretty good. And we were talking again about that sort of PPE consideration stuff. They weren't using anything, and I think a few of us have started to wonder about, you know, PE staff on the front line, as it were. You know, even if we go through all the social distancing solutions to get people spread out and all of that kind of stuff, if we're doing something active, someone's bound to get injured, and then who deals with that? You've got to go and pick some kid up who's crying, who's got a twisted ankle. You know, what are the things in place for that? And interestingly, I think that was one of those things that when they raised it at QEH, the powers that be thought, yes, that is a good idea. We better start thinking about it now. And I imagine that, you know, risk assessments and things like that need to constantly be worked on. One other thing which was quite interesting, the Welsh schools are a bit ahead of us on this, is Rosslyn Park, which I don't know whether anyone's thinking about. You were talking there about the sort of term shift for rugby, and a few people were pretty upset with how Rosslyn Park are managing this, the 2020 event and therefore the 2021. So obviously no refund from this year for fairly dubious reasons that they wrote to us about. The generous 10% discount on this year's, if we all sort of accept their double glazing sales technique of making sure you all sign up and pay another £800 by September for an event that you don't know that will happen. And if it doesn't happen, you don't know if you get your money back next year either for that. So just seemed to be more money on more money. And there was just a debate about whether or not it might be possible to get a group of schools together to say we're not going to accept it and we're not going to enter. It obviously would need a mass block of people. And actually, Neil, we could finish by asking whether you might take something to HMC on our behalf and see whether they might mention it.
It came from the last HMC Sport Committee meeting, and the Secretary is writing to Rosslyn Park to express on behalf of HMC dissatisfaction with that. And there's also a joint associations meeting with the RFU tomorrow, at which it'll come up again. So that's not dead, and certainly pressure. But it is bizarrely a privately run operation. And I know that the RFU have spoken to them as well. They've been lobbied on it, and they have no jurisdiction over it, bizarrely. And it is a privately run event. I personally would agree with you that threatening a boycott would be the most useful thing, but it would just need a bit of trade union solidarity to do it.
Yeah, maybe someone could mobilise in the chat room if they're interested in getting that going, or if they think it's a good idea.
Well, I think it is an absolute scandal, what happened at a time when... Rich, thanks very much for that. And some good ideas coming in there. A couple more before we finish. If Richard, are you happy to just give us a quick update on the Southwest Group again, and then hopefully Chris could give us one on the rugby group?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Neil. Afternoon, everyone. For the sake of brevity, and so not to be repetitive, because the themes are fairly common, I'm sure, across the regions. 17 schools got together and met just before half term. One of the things which we focused on initially was focusing on the non-negotiables. So if we were going to have a change to our programs in September, what things did we want to carry through? What were our core beliefs and purpose? And that sparked quite an interesting debate. There was quite a bit of disparity between the collaborative planning opportunities. You will find it difficult as a director of sport to have those planning meetings if all the people that you want to meet with and discuss with are currently furloughed and you're not able to do that. So you're operating in your silo. I don't know how many people in this meeting this afternoon will share that thought, would love to be collaboratively chairing discussion groups and what have you. But that was interesting and frustrating at the same time. There were lots of concerns about the extent to which we would plan for anything in the context of a fluid landscape, and recognition that ultimately whatever we recommended and advised, our headmasters were going to get together and make some decisions themselves anyway. And this was a fortnight ago, and they hadn't done that at that point. Since then, I know that the heads, certainly in our area, have got together and have met, and I think they were meeting again today or tomorrow. So that will filter down from them, and whichever school or camp you fell into, if you were being told we are going to do cricket and we are going to do tennis, I think that largely depended on whether your school bursar was prepared to maintain cricket squares throughout the summer at additional cost, so that you may or may not play on them in September. That was an interesting point that some people raised. There was a discussion point in our area regarding clusters and pods of schools who would collectively join together. So if we did end up having any kind of fixtures, whatever sports they were going to be in, might be very, very small. So you might have 3 or 4 schools that might agree to play each other geographically, and there might be a real limit on travel backwards and forwards. So we find ourselves very close to Rich's Monmouth group, and you've got an M5 corridor that may well be working together. We might have a group of Bath schools that will work together. We might have a group of Somerset schools that might.
Did you have any discussion, Rich, about changing the seasons, pushing rugby back later, swapping?
Yeah, we did. I mean, certainly we discussed the 6th model and breaking things down. And for us, the 6th term, the May half term that we're in now, is only 4 weeks long. So we certainly looked at a feasible model of term 1 being cricket and tennis, term 2, if it was possible and feasible, being rugby and hockey for girls, carrying on through into term 3, and then term 4 after February half term, and term 5 after Easter as a possible boys hockey, girls netball. And then that final 4 weeks of something as a finish. We weren't sure what we would do, minus year 13 and minus the 5th form GCSE groups. That obviously depended a lot on national governing bodies. Everyone was a bit hesitant to try and organise things if cup competitions and trials and everything else was going to operate outside of those windows. And again, the hesitancy to try and make plans when we just don't know what that situation was going to look like.
So you're thinking of reassessing again in September?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to meet again tomorrow, and I'm not sure whether we'll meet weekly moving forward. I saw in the chat just now that there's monthly plans. It is so fluid and things are changing so quickly. We as a school have come back this Monday and started one-to-one coaching sessions for groups of kids. So we're tackling the risk assessments and cleaning of equipment and so on and what have you, bringing back some furloughed staff to enable that to happen. We don't have year 6 and reception in year 1 like some colleagues have today. So we're just learning that ourselves. But it'd be interesting to see where we go. Risk assessment, as Rich said, was one of the big issues that people.
If I could say that, I think I mentioned it last time that HMC was going to produce a template for that, based on a number of schools that have very kindly shared what they were doing, and that will be. I've seen it this morning, and that will be with your heads on by Friday this week at the latest. So there will be a template for risk assessment in various circumstances, informed by what Elton showed us the other week. Rich, thanks very much for that. Just wonder, Chris, whether you might finish us off with a brief summary of rugby group issues, and then those others we'll pick up next week. Thanks for those people who are offering Claire a membership of groups. Chris, welcome. Thanks. What's happening in the rugby group? Anything?
Yeah, very similar to Richard there. So Ian Simpson actually set up a meeting for the rugby group. We've agreed that we won't be playing any fixtures for the first 3 weeks, so we can at least then start planning. And I'll be quite keen actually to plan for the whole term with no fixtures as a starting point. We all agreed as well that we need to be agile and flexible, and maybe wait until the end of August, September when we really know. So we've set up a meeting once a month during the holidays, so that we can discuss what our plans are. But it's changing every day, so I think we will have to meet regularly. But for the minute, we've agreed that we won't be playing any fixtures against each other for at least the first 3 weeks.
Right, with a view to then running your own separate programs during that time.
Yes, internally, yes.
Yeah, And any thoughts beyond that of seasonal shift, or is that still in the melting pot?
No, because I think, yeah, it's still in the melting pot, because I think we need to wait and see what guidelines are out by the end of August. So if we meet on the 11th of August, I think we like to have a better idea then of what we could do. And what I don't want to do is plan lots of things for September, then get to August and it's all changed. It's changing. So, and let's face it, most sports departments are pretty flexible and agile. Even if we came back a few days early, I'm pretty sure we could sort a good plan out.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Chris. And we'll take updates from those other meetings that people have told us about there as well. Nikki suggested that we have a poll on Roslyn Park, which we're very happy to arrange for next week's meeting. And if there are other topics like that that you'd like to throw into the mix, please do let us know, and we'll do that. And I think we maybe devote a bit more time next week to looking at seasonal possibilities. It is 5:01, and I do have a booking on the tea at 5:30. So thanks very much for your contributions again. Please do, I'm very keen that this is a collaborative thing. If you've got ideas, questions, etc., or initiatives that you've got that you're prepared to share with people, please do email Helen in advance, and we'll make sure we get them on. And if there's other things that you want to know, as Paul very kindly contributed, where things are happening elsewhere in the room.